Good afternoon, Winnipeg. Welcome to the first Small Business Forum of the 2021-22 season. My name is Sriraj Patel, and I'm the board chair of the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce. It's an honor to be here with you today. Before we start, on behalf of the Chamber, I'd like to acknowledge we're gathered today virtually on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional land of the Ojibwe, Cree, Dakota, and Dene Nations, and the homeland of the Red River Métis. Throughout the month of September, the Winnipeg Chamber has been offering our members free access to the 4 Seasons of Reconciliation online course created by the First Nations University of Canada. If you're interested in learning more about this free reconciliation education, our Chamber team will drop you the link in the facts section in the chat right now. I would now like to pass it off to Christine Tubiera and Larissa Peck, the co-chairs of our Small Business Advisory Council. Enjoy the event.
Christine, you're muted.
Gotta love it. Am I all better now? Thanks, Larissa. Thanks, Raj. My name's Christine Tabera, and I'm the founder of LMVA Consulting and co-chair of the Winnipeg Chambers of Commerce's Small Business Advisory Council. I'm thrilled to be here alongside my Small Business Advisory Council co-chair, Larissa Peck, founder of Tandem Collaborative. Together, we'll be your forum's host for today. If this is your first small business forum, welcome. We're glad that you're able to join us, and we're looking forward to the conversation we're going to have today. We encourage you to view the meeting in speaker view rather than gallery view mode to ensure the best viewer experience. If you've been to one of the small business forums, whether it was virtual or in person, you may recall that our small business forum programming and workshops are guided by the Chamber's Small Business Advisory Council. The Small Business Advisory Council is made up of 10 to 12 Winnipeg small business owners who volunteer their time to provide insight on current challenges SMEs are facing. And I see some names in our crowd are here today as well. 4 times a year, the Chamber focuses on free workshops and forums to address those current issues. Past topics include mental health, marketing, strategic planning, and community building.
Thanks, Christine. I'm happy to be here as your council co-chair. So today's Small Business Forum topic addresses one of the top issues our members face, which is talent. As small business owners, how do we find the right people with the right skills and attitudes to help our businesses run effectively? And once you find those people and ask them to join your team, as leaders, how do we keep our people happy and engaged? Today, more and more workplaces are shifting to hybrid or strictly virtual workplaces. And so how are we as leaders keeping our workplace culture strong? So I think these are just a few topics we'll be covering in the next 2 hours. So we encourage you to grab a notebook or pen and paper or some Google document or somewhere in your virtual space to take some notes and get ready for this conversation. But of course, we first also have to thank our small business forum supporters. And those are BDC, KPMG, the Chambers of Commerce Group Insurance Plan, and RBC. So we are always thankful to each of them for supporting our small business community. And without them, we wouldn't be able to host these forums for our small business community at no cost. We would now like to introduce you to our first speaker.
Thanks, Larissa. Dawn Haus is a CPHR professional who has an appreciation for achieving results through a positive work environment and is responsible for True North Sports and Entertainment's HR program as a VP of HR. Dawn joined True North in 2014 from a local employee benefits and human resources consulting firm where she spent 15 years. Looking forward to hearing all her knowledge today. Dawn served as a volunteer board member for the Canadian Institute of Management, Winnipeg branch for 5 years, and the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors for 2 years. She is the current chair of the Downtown Winnipeg Biz Management Board and is a current St. James Assiniboine Minor Hockey Association board member. She's also served as co-chair for the Walk With Us annual fundraising campaign in support of Manitoba Down Syndrome Society and is an active volunteer with her local community club. Born and raised in Winnipeg, Dawn continues to live here with her husband, Chris, and their 2 sons. She's an avid runner, enjoys all things outdoors, including hiking, cycling, kayaking, water skiing, and golf. Welcome, Dawn.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us and taking time out of your busy day. How are you doing?
Good. I'm good. I'm very excited and just really want to thank you for inviting me to come and participate in your small business forum today. Yes, I have a passion for small business. I spent a good chunk of my career in a startup. I got to watch it grow and flourish and then sell. And I learned a lot from that experience. I have a lot of great memories from that experience. But I also have a passion for workplace culture and seeing people grow and thrive. So, I've attended a lot of these types of virtual sessions in the last year and a half, like many people. So I'm looking forward to seeing what it's like on the other side and just having some fun with this conversation today. And I see there's a really, great diversity of different types of organizations. So I hope what I share with you today, you might be able to pick something that it resonates or it's useful for you.
Well, I think that's great. And, we want to remind everyone, we do have a Q&A right after for about 10 minutes with Dawn. So, feel free to post your questions in the chat and Larissa and I will pass those through. So as a seasoned HR executive, can you quickly walk through your common hiring process? What do you do? Where do you start?
Yeah. As far as, I guess, where you start, what I really like to do is figure out what it is that you need, what it is that you're looking for, and then take that a step further and identify deal breakers. I like to do that because I find when you get to the end of, or near the end of a recruitment process, you might get clouded by a lot of the details as you've talked to a lot of people. You may have other individuals who are part of that decision process. And if you're lucky, you get to a point where you might have a few people that you're considering. And ideal circumstance would be to take a little piece of everybody and make a super person, which that's not possible. And so if you have those deal breakers, then if you start to, get a little bit clouded near the end, go back to them and that might help you in your decision. When I work with any managers on a recruitment, I always say to be open to adjusting though. Like you've got your deal breakers, but you start out with one idea in mind. And I always sort of use the analogy of a mold, and you're never going to get anyone to kind of fit exactly into that mold. And sometimes you even learn more about what you're looking for just by talking to a lot of individuals. So I find where you start isn't always where you're going to end. So if you're really fixed, on something specific, you might have a difficult time finding the right person. And then as far as meeting with individuals, I like to, I don't know how everybody approaches this, but I like to meet with people more than once because what you're essentially trying to do is you're trying to find someone who's going to be a fit for the role, but you want to make sure that the role is going to be a fit for that person. And to spend 30 minutes with somebody, that's not very much time really to spend potentially years with somebody. And so you want to try to get it right. And so be ready to meet with somebody more than once. And there's been so many times where you've met with somebody and then you bring them in a week or two later and you talk to them and you're thinking, where was that person that I met last week? Like, what's going on here? So, that has really rung true. And then one aspect of hiring that I feel and find is very important is to really look for character in individuals when you're recruiting. And so one way to do this is by asking them their own personal values, but you can have a little bit of fun with this. You can just ask it in an interview, but sometimes what I'll do is we'll ask someone to come prepared ahead of time to share their own personal values. And depending on the type of role that it is, especially I find if it's a creative role, that you're working for, like for a longer term type of role, then you would sometimes find that those individuals will put a lot of their own flair into it. And I've seen some amazingly creative responses to that question. So sometimes that can be really appropriate depending on the type of role that you're hiring. And then, I know that, if it's retail or restaurant, you may not go into this sort of depth, but behavior assessments is something I'm a fan of. I find that it's a really objective way to get a sense of somebody's behavior and how they might act under pressure. And it also helps you to identify some questions that you can ask those individuals. But I always caution, don't use a behavior assessment as your decision tool. It's only it's a tool to help ask those questions and just do a lot of digging to better understand somebody. And then another practice is just get them out of the informal or the formality of the interview process, because a lot of times you'll interview somebody and they're nervous. They're so nervous. And you can't fault them for that, because if they're a professional job seeker, they might be really good at interviewing, but then they fool you. If they're nervous, then they're actually being their true selves. So what I like to do is get somebody out of that environment, because I don't know how many times I've gone through and think, gosh, I wish we could just know that real true person, but they're trying to put on a show because they're trying to sell themselves. And if you get them out of that formal place, then you can really get a sense of who their true being is. And then just lastly, for references, I always, references, some people think that that's going to be their decision point. And for me, it's usually you're 95% there, because when you get a list of references from somebody, it's all people who are going to say good things about them, right? So, how are you going to use that to make your decision? So instead, I often focus on the types of references that somebody gives. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. And ideally, if you can, talk to somebody who has worked with them or led them recently. And what I like to do is, rather than dig up dirt on that person, is find out what you need to know to help make that person successful. Because if you're speaking to a former leader, then they'll be able to give you that insight, and that will really help you down the road to better understand what makes that person tick.
Awesome. That's, chock full of information.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Dawn. And I love that last comment that you made about when you're seeking out references. I find that when I am being asked to provide a reference on a candidate, that I will often kind of slip in that kind of information. So it's good to know that it's also being looked for. Mm-hmm. I think you kind of touched on this a little bit when you were speaking about character and behavior assessments, but when you're building your own team, what are some of the important traits that you're really constantly looking for kind of across the board?
Yeah, character for sure, but you can have somebody with great character. They have to know how to do the job as well, to have that credibility in it. But skills can be taught, but you can't teach somebody to be a good person. But it really is two sides of the coin. So, their humility, their integrity, can they walk the talk, but also do they have the qualifications and the knowledge and the skill set? So that's the first. And then the next is passion for the work, passion for the, what the organization does, but also passion for their craft. When I meet somebody who wants to get a foot in the door, anytime or most times when they take that role, they come in and then they're setting their sights already on the next thing, and they're not giving everything into the role that they were intended to bring. And it doesn't always work out very well. But also I find that passion, some days are hard. Every day isn't easy, especially, over the last 18 months or so, it has not been easy. And so, aside from COVID, if, you're driving to a meeting in a snowstorm and you don't like what you do, that kind of sucks. And so I always try to encourage managers to find someone who really truly loves what they're doing, whether that's, processing a payable or, creating a graphic or serving a customer. So they really have to, down at the core, be passionate about it. And I talk about cultural fit but I take that further and turn that into cultural contribution, because and I mean, I'm not the first person to say this. It's been said before, but the reason for that is if you hire for fit, it's all just going to be people the same. And if you hire for contribution, then you're going to get different perspectives, and that's important. And so, you know, when somebody joins an organization or a workplace, they're coming in and they're adapting to that workplace. But I always say you have to adapt to that person as well, because you brought them in for a reason. They've got something to contribute. But also, I find that the best perspective is to get from somebody who's fresh, because they're not into the weeds and into the daily grind of everything, and you can really get some great ideas from a new person. And then building out a team, looking at bench strength. So it's just like a sports team, right? You can't have everybody play the same position. You need to identify what your strengths of your team are, where those gaps are, and then focus on filling those gaps, and even filling your own gaps, and you know, taking that humble pill and seeing what you don't do very well, because you know we're all not experts in everything. And if you bring people in who can help bolster the team, that's just going to be better for everybody in the long run. And then if it's possible, depending on the structure of a team, but what I like to do with our HR team here is think about succession planning. And so have folks who are, like for us, we've got folks at different levels or different points in their career. So we're all in growth mode. And so then we can also complement each other that way. And what we like to do, or what we do here, is we have it so that everybody on the team, it doesn't matter what, you know, where they're at in their career or what level they're at, they're an expert in something. And so generally we're all doing the same type of work, but split things up and have certain people be experts. They're the go-to people. So, you know, somebody who is, you know, really technical with things like HR policies and things like that may not be the greatest on relationships, and somebody who's really good with systems might not be the best at communicating. And so try to align the strengths with the you know, with the expertise, and then they're the go-to, and then they can focus on that and study that, and then just continue to grow professionally and contribute to the team that way.
I love the idea that you talk about cultural contribution and making sure you've got those right people in place, and it doesn't necessarily need to be fit. And our members, when we talk about what are the biggest challenges we hear, is finding talent. They don't know where to find that talent, where to find that right group of people. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the industry that you're in, there's a number of ways so there's the typical put it online, the job boards, LinkedIn, social media, maybe the newspaper. I don't know if a lot of folks are still doing that. Depending on the type of role that you're hiring, though, that can be effective. Of course, employee referrals is not unusual as well. And then sometimes, depending on the type of role, you know, working with a third-party recruiter. I see Staff Max is on, and we've worked with Staff Max before. And I mean, it does cost to do that, but you know, they're working with individuals who are active job seekers. And another way to approach it is through a temp to hire type of scenario, or just on a temporary basis. And then beyond that, you know, I've been known to, you know, either cold call, shoulder tap somebody that you've met in the past, or maybe look on LinkedIn to try to find folks, because there are some people who just aren't actively looking, and they get that tap on the shoulder, and then they may or may not be interested. And then taking it beyond that, there's industry specific types of associations, and they often have their own job boards. So then you can really tap into those pools. And like I said, there may not be people who are looking actively, but some of those associations will send out emails to their members and list the jobs or that what's on their job board, and it might just pique their interest. And then taking it even further, working with education institutions. I mean, this doesn't always work if you're in a pinch to hire somebody leaves, you've got to fill that. But if you can start to think proactively about about hiring and about your talent pipeline, then if you think about where you may have, more need, or you might have more turnover, working with an education institution, seeing if you can go in as a guest speaker, because then you can start to make connections with the students. They get exposed to you, they're aware of your company, and then when they're graduating and they're job ready, then it might be a fit at that time. Or if it's possible, and some very large organizations do this, but smaller organizations can do the same, is actually find a role where you can actually create it to be a student role, because a lot of the education institutions, they have their placements all throughout the year. Turn that into an actual job. A lot of times people think hiring a student is kind of giving them all the work that nobody wants to do. But if you can create a job that's really meaningful for a student, you'll get a good reputation for it. But then if you have students that come in and do really good work, you've already got a chance to work with them. And once they graduate, they've got familiarity with you. And then boom, you've got somebody who is ready to go. And then beyond that, especially in really specialized types of work environments, people can go and get their general education, but there are skills that you cannot learn by going to school. And if you look at growing your own talent, investing in the people that you have already, and getting them skilled up either through some sort of mentorship, internally, or, beyond the scope of your organization. But you may be able to get them ready so that when there is an opening, then they're job ready, they're ready to slot in, and just look for that up and coming talent. But really, it all comes down to timing, I find, as well. You can post a position, you get nothing that's really good. You might go back again, do it a month or two later, and then all these great resumes come in. I find during the holidays, it's tough. People aren't necessarily looking for jobs. And depending on the type of industry that you're in, it may quiet down over summertime or something like that. But I say that I'm always scouting, always looking. You might meet somebody, they stand out to you, and you might meet them at an event or something like that. So keep them in mind for future. And if possible, this has worked in the past, but if you can, make room for them then, especially if they're looking and that they would be a great fit, but you have to watch them walk away. How unfortunate is that? And if you can find a way to build it into your budget so that if you do find that really good person, you can bring them in at the time when the time is right, and create a role for them. That's a great thing about, if you're a small business, you've got a lot more flexibility than a larger organization would have. But at the end of the day, don't settle. Sometimes, you're in a pinch, you need to hire somebody, but getting through a recruitment process, and I'll say to myself, or I'll ask a manager, are we settling by hiring this person? And if the answer is yes, generally in 6 to 12 months, you're kind of doing it again anyway. So don't be afraid of going back to square one. It happens.
Dawn, this is a treasure trove of information. Thank you so much for sharing so much, and we're only partway through. But I think I noticed that in one of Riel's messages or emails prior to this session, she did indicate that the recording might be available afterwards, which, on your note with timing, I think, maybe we're not always in hiring mode. Maybe that's not on our radar today, but in 2 weeks, in 2 months, it might be, and we might need to come back to these. And I certainly can't take notes quickly enough. So I think that this is something that I'll be revisiting. I think it's cool to hear you indicate so many different avenues of where you might find someone. And I think even myself, I had an excellent experience as a student, having a work placement, and then ended up being hired by that company 2 years into being a grad, I guess. And that was great. But as someone who's looking to hire potentially in the future, maybe that's not something that I would have thought about. And so it's great to recall all of these options and the diversity of ways that we might be able to find people, especially these days, because finding people is absolutely a thing right now.
It is.
Yeah. I think so. Our next question that we have here is on that note, hiring isn't easy. And I think that's something we can all agree on. Can you share some of your challenges that you faced when you are hiring, and how do you address those?
Yes, hiring can be a challenge these days. Is I could tell some stories. It's a little bit crazy, but I think that the biggest challenge when it comes to hiring, I mean, I talked about timing, but is time, because it takes a lot of time, and who has time, but you really need to invest in it if you want to get it right. But if it does take a lot of time, there might be ways to look for some efficiencies in how you're doing it, depending on how often you're doing it. But if you're doing it frequently, what I really like to do is look at the pool of candidates and then figure out the best way to reach as many people as possible, and then decide who you're going to spend more time with and get to know. Because how many times have you sat down with somebody and very quickly into it, you're like, nope, this is not going to work. And then you've wasted their time. You know, it's not a good use of your time. And so one way that we've started doing this, it's kind of a result of COVID. It's a positive thing, I guess, but we've started doing, and I think other organizations might do this, but is a screening questionnaire. And that's just as simple as like a SurveyMonkey or a Microsoft form. And it's really those questions that you ask when you first sit down with somebody. So why are you looking to leave? Why are you interested? What are you looking for? All of those kind of initial things. And it's really useful because some people don't fill it out, and then you know that they would have possibly been no-shows. And then it's a really great way to get an idea of how those individuals think. In some situations, maybe writing is an important aspect of the job. So you get to see a bit about how they write. But then from there, you can decide who you're going to spend more time with. And the quality of people that you're meeting is just that much better. So, and then it gives you better exposure to more people, because rather than, setting up 3 days worth of interviews, you could spend, an hour or so reviewing all of those questionnaires and, cut that time significantly that you would invest there. Another challenge, maybe a frustration, well, I guess it's a challenge though, is when you go to offer somebody a job, you found the right person, you're all set, you're ready, right? And you go and you offer them the job, and then they've found another job. They've just accepted another job. Like you were this close. And so if you can speed up your process, then and move with some pace, you may have more success and combat that challenge. Because if somebody's really good, then they're going to get snapped up. Somebody's going to grab them. If they're sending out their resumes, then you're likely not the only one that they've sent their resume to. So try to move with some pace. And then, some other ways to get around, because it is, you're competing for talent, right? And so I always remember that and I tell managers this, it's a mutual decision. And so you're selling yourself as well. So think about how you're selling yourself in the process, and get creative with it and package it accordingly, depending on the type of workforce that you're recruiting for. So if you've got like a wellness benefit, or fresh food in your lunchroom, or Fridays off in the summer, or whatever, mention that, package it really nicely, because if they know that, money is important, but there's a lot of other things that people value, and you don't always know what that is. And if it's that one thing that you've said that makes you stand out against somebody else who is vying for that same person, it might be something as simple as that. That's their tipping point, and then you've got them on your team.
Well, when you look at trying to have the right package and things like that for potential candidates, how creative do you get with those packages? Because you're a large organization, so then of course there's probably some guidelines, or have you created a framework to what works to have some sort of consistency betwing your groups?
Well, we try to put out everything that's out there. So all of the perks that are available, being a larger organization, you've got some advantages, but then you also have some disadvantages, because when you're smaller, you can be more flexible or more adaptable to what you're offering your employees. But I just say put it all out there, but package it really nicely, because some people, they'll join and then they'll be, oh, I didn't know we get this and this and this. But if you mention it through the recruitment process, then that might just be enough to get them on board.
Great, great. And so how are you packaging from a True North's perspective, returning to office, whether you're in-person, hybrid model, all of that. A lot of companies right now are facing this return to office spaces, and it is a nice benefit if you need that flexibility to be working from home. What's your thoughts on hybrid models, and what should businesses be considering, if they're thinking of making the switch?
Yeah. So our organization, we were partially virtual during the shutdown, but we're the type of business that it's really difficult to run virtually, being, mass assembly and things like that. But despite that, have been really keenly listening to what is going on out there with different workplaces and talking to counterparts at different organizations to see what they're doing. And I think it really comes down to listening to your employees and knowing your people, knowing your employees, and what's important to them, because it really is a balance. There's for sure benefits to working from home or working virtually in some way, shape, or form, because obviously the balance for employees, if they, I've heard people say, oh, I could throw in a load of laundry or get groceries or whatever. It might mean a cost savings for your organization if you're renting office space. That's a big expense item. And then another way to look at it as well is, it may give you an opportunity to tap into other regions. Maybe it's outside of Winnipeg and somewhere in Manitoba or beyond that, but you can reach different talent pools that way. So definitely benefits. But then on the flip side, then, there's those lost opportunities that happen with those organic connections or collisions that happen in the lunchroom or the water cooler. And you have to really ask yourself, what does that mean for culture? So, definitely those are things to consider. Another consideration is a blended environment. I mean, realistically, you can't have some organizations, definitely you can completely run virtually, but if you're front facing and you've got customers, then you're not going to be able to have people do that from home. And so if you have a portion of your workforce who is on site, then you have to give some thought to that. I've heard of some organizations that give additional perks to those people because it may not be seen as fair by those folks. And does that kind of create a divide between folks in your culture? But really, everyone has different circumstances. And so, some people love working from home for those reasons that I mentioned. Some people, it's not conducive. They might have a partner or other people in their home that are also working from home, and they're fighting for bandwidth, or they're working in a really small space and they're stuck in a bedroom, and that's maybe not ideal for them. So it's just a matter of understanding those circumstances. So I've heard a lot about policies, and those can typically be pretty prescriptive. And so rather if that was something that we were to consider, I would recommend to somebody is instead think of it as guidelines instead, or principles. And then it's because you can't paint everybody with the same brush. But it's important to make it clear what those expectations are when it comes down to it. And just be mindful that, communicating with people is very different. You are losing out on those opportunities for collisions. And I think it'll be impactful to managers a lot, because now instead of having those drop-bys or those hallway conversations, you're not getting those conversations, and you really have to schedule them, and it does take a lot more time to do it. So just, a lot has happened in the last 18 months. Who knows what the future holds? So leave some space to adapt going forward. And then just, lastly, because, I hear this a lot from different people, is that they might have a workforce that is working from home, but the business owner or the leaders aren't. And what kind of message is that sending? So lead by example and make it safe for people to work from home if that's the direction that you choose. And I've also heard that the work from home model can sometimes encroach on personal time, and just be just respect, the personal time of your employees.
Yeah, I think that's some great advice, Dawn. Thank you. I think, yeah, it's tricky to navigate, and we're all trying to understand how that's going to look for all of us in our different situations. Switching gears a little bit, I think there's a lot of focus on diversity, inclusion, and equity in workplaces lately, and maybe hopefully especially over the last year and a bit. There's also a lot of research proving inclusive workplaces attract top talent and drive innovation. In your perspective, how can businesses be more inclusive and accessible when they are hiring and in their hiring practices?
Yeah, so I definitely agree. There's a solid business case for diversity and inclusion. I'm not going to profess to be an expert on the topic. I think we're all on our own diversity journey. But I would say that if there's anything that I've learned or would recommend is to just be, any practices, just to be sure that they're authentic and genuine, and you're not doing something just for the sake of checking a box. And understand that diversity, dimensions of diversity go beyond, what you might think, ethnicity and religion and gender, but think about skills or abilities, even neurodiversity, and of course, generation or age groups. So if you consider that as part of diversity, and so in terms of becoming more inclusive, I think the first step is to, and especially when hiring, is to become aware of your biases. And if you've got others who are participating in a recruitment process, make sure that they're aware of their biases, because we all have them. It's science, it's proven. And so do a check, whether that's just reading about unconscious bias or actually taking a course on unconscious bias, so that there's definitely awareness there. And then just on a more practical level, you can do very simple things to be more inclusive in your hiring practices. If you think about how you're posting your jobs, what kind of language are you using in your job ads? And I know that there's some sophisticated software technology that you can use as a tool to have make sure you have more inclusive language, but it can be something as simple as Microsoft Word. There's a setting that you can go and turn on, and it can know, like, differently than it checks your spelling or your grammar, it can check how inclusive your language is. And then as far as the hiring process, include diversity in that hiring process, because they're also going to bring different perspectives to the types of questions that get asked as well, and that will help ensure diversity. One technique or approach, and it's kind of a best practice, I guess, is to use the same set of questions for every single candidate, so that you've got a bit of a baseline that you're comparing folks to. You might hear where your bias kicks in, and you ask a lot of really good questions, or you go into an interview with somebody and maybe you're not sold on them and you don't cover everything. So really force yourself to ask the same questions of everybody. And then lastly is how you review resumes. And it's especially when you're reviewing a lot of resumes, if you're getting a lot, that's a great thing, but how much time are you spending on those resumes? I read once that the average time that somebody spends reviewing a resume is like less than 10 seconds. And if you think when you talk to different people, I'll ask, like, what do you look at first when you look at a resume? And as many different people as I talk to, it's always a very different answer. And that's what they're sort of focusing on. So if you find a way to really review the resumes in depth, and so how I do this and how we do this is we actually take the qualifications, we set like a scale, a rating scale, and then you have to rate the qualifications based off of what's provided on the resume to get to a number for those candidates, and that forces you to read everything in there. It's daunting. It can be really daunting, like reviewing all of those resumes, but it really forces you to read through it. And if you don't do that, think about all the people that you're missing out on. I've done that with some managers, especially when I kind of saw something in the chat about working with somebody with biases, and they go into it with a particular person in mind, or something very specific. And I've seen situations where we've used that approach, and the ending is surprising, and really great hires have come out of it. And if we hadn't done that, they would have completely been overlooked. And then if you want to take it a step further, there's some knowledge, or there's some statistics that there is some biases regarding names of individuals, and you may gravitate more to either gender names or ethnic names. And so what we do is we do take off the names of folks on resumes. Either you have someone do that for you, you just black them out. We actually do it in a spreadsheet, and it's all hidden, and you don't know who the folks are that have applied. And then you're really objectively reviewing them, and that is inclusive. That's a really inclusive approach.
Again, I can't keep up with all the notes that I'm trying to write, and I'm going to have to rewatch the scoring card and putting everybody on that same playing field by looking at those resumes and having that set criteria to kind of really hone down on their expertise and knowledge is great. And it's a great suggestion for people who don't have something like that to look at and evaluate their evaluations. Thanks, Dawn. And, as we ask our last question that we have formally, before the forum, you shared that business owners should clearly communicate their vision for employees. Did you want to take a couple minutes to expand on that for us?
Yeah, I mean, you could no doubt do a full session on vision and strategy.
Exactly.
So the reason for mentioning it, though, is that one key contributor to growing your talent is retaining them. And to retain them, you want to keep them engaged. And an important component to employee engagement is meaningful work. So folks who understand how their role contributes to the vision of the organization will help lead to that meaningful work. So, it's something that we think that employees will know, and business owners and leaders, they create and they articulate and they own and they drive their vision. But then you have to really wonder what percentage of their employees can name their organization's, top priorities in order. My eyes were open to this. I once read a survey. It was done with 600 organizations. It was done by Inc. magazine, and it revealed that less than 2% of their employees could name their company's top 3 priorities. So if you think about what if your entire team understood exactly how their work connects to the bigger picture of the organization? And it doesn't have to be complicated. It just comes down to over communicating your priorities, and just being really clear with your vision, so that others know where you're all going and how they're all going to get there, and just some really simple ways that you can do. I mean, some organizations get really splashy with it. They put it up on the walls, and in different type of environments that can really work well. But, even when you're addressing employees and speaking with them, inserted into those conversations, some organizations have cards that are posted throughout the workplace or at desks. They make it part of the onboarding process, but really it's just about making it part of everyday language, because as a leader or as a business owner, it's your job to make sure that everybody knows the direction that you're going in, and you need to make sure that they understand how their work fits into that bigger picture, so that their work can be meaningful.
Exactly, because everyone has a purpose and everyone has a role. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, we have a few more minutes for some Q&As, and I know that we've had some in the chat, so thanks for everyone who's been putting them in the chats. And I think Aloris is going to start with asking some of those questions.
Sure. And if anything else has come to you, please continue to add your questions to the chat, and we'll get those over to Dawn. But Scott had a question back when we were speaking about potentially hiring students or having students work and then transitioning into a role within the company. And his question was, do you have a strategy when it comes to student or youth engagement? And how do you ensure those employment experiences are meaningful for students?
Yes, if you have the means to do so, what we do is there's some organizations that have huge student programs, like they hire hundreds of students a year. We maybe have 10 in a year, but what we try to do is we group them together and we bring them on, we onboard them around the same time. We onboard them as a group because then they make connection with each other. We find an event for them to do together as well, because it's intimidating as a student, but then they get to share their experiences with each other. But then what we do at the end of their placement, and we tell them this at the beginning of their placement, so we don't just surprise them at the end, but close to the end of their placement, what we do is we have them come in and make a presentation to our leadership group and to individuals who worked with them in the department about their experience, because that gives them an opportunity to get some presentation skills. It really, they're reflecting on their time, as well as it gives us an opportunity to see them in action and to see what they learned. And we learn more about our workplace and we can make improvements from what they're sharing as well.
Great.
I hope that answers the question.
That's helpful, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I think it does. Hopefully that answers it, Scott, for you. Earlier in the chat, somebody had posted, what are some of the best ways to encourage executives or hiring managers that tend to have fixed mindsets, buying into, for example, your scoring card or managing expectations, to be flexible with hiring and willing to train?
So the question is working with executives who have fixed mindsets.
Fixed mindsets. That fixed mindsets is what was in the chat there. I don't know if that impacts, because you guys have that scoring card that you talked about that helps put everybody into that level playing field. But is there something from your experience that you can kind of help provide some insight from that?
I ask a lot of questions. What is it they're looking for, and sometimes they talk themselves into it. The scorecard definitely helped. That has been a major one, because the fixed mindsets are typically because of a bias. And so it's trying to get them to look, you can't say, oh, you're biased, but you have to try to find ways to identify that. And so that has been successful. But sometimes even it's just like, hey, let's give this a try. Because they might want to just go directly and hire somebody without looking what's in the market. Then they have success that way. And then the next time, then they're much more open to it. So it can sometimes take time to kind of break down those fixed mindsets, but there's just small tactics or strategies that you can use.
So just slowly knocking down those stubborn and old-fashioned people, as was said in the chat. Perfect.
Yeah.
Great.
Jumping around a little bit, something that on our side of things, something that a number of our clients have experienced lately is sort of that question of, with cash flow and recovery looking a little bit unpredictable at the moment still, weighing your options between hiring like third-party contractors and hiring staff. And when you're kind of trying to make that decision, what should you know, or what are the pros and cons from an HR standpoint?
Okay. So from an HR standpoint, so I guess there's the technical side of it. So first of all, working with a contractor, an independent contractor, you have to make sure that it meets the test or meets the definition of CRA's arm's length employee, so you don't get in trouble with them for statutory remittances. And then, just technically making sure that you've got a contract with them so that the expectations are clear. So things like services, conflict of interest, sometimes even like talking through like what expenses are going to be covered. Sometimes there's a situation where there's insurance and liability, so you have to work through that. And then, of course, any good contract has clear termination or, how it would end if it didn't work out. And then I guess just more practically, I mean, pros are you definitely have flexibility working with contractors because you can scale your workforce. Maybe you need someone who isn't a full-time job, or it's really hard to find somebody on a part-time basis with the skills that you need. And it's great for projects. I find when working with contractors, independent contractors, it can sometimes be a different commitment level, and they may not share that same vision as you. But also, if you have kind of a group of employees, how does the contractor integrate with the rest of the team? And so if it's for a longer period, I mean, for a project, usually people are pretty, they understand, they're aware, but if it's, kind of a long-term strategy, be intentional with how you integrate them with the rest of the group, because it almost becomes an us versus them mentality. And you really want to make them feel like they belong, right? They're humans. They just have a different employment arrangement. So sometimes people see it that way. And so just be really intentional with how you bring everybody together.
Oh, great. And how do you help guide some of these people on their leadership journey? Leading people is dynamic and it's ongoing. And, do you have any recommendations for people who want training or added support, books you've read, processes, something that you think that people should look into or follow, or maybe even encourage the chamber to help, some of us small businesses with?
Yeah, no, I mean, I read a statistic, I can't remember exactly it, but it's basically the average age when somebody becomes a manager, and then the average age when they actually get any kind of leadership training. And there's a really wide gap. I think it's almost like a decade where they actually get that formal training. My perspective on training is find a way to make it last or have some longevity, so that it's not flavor of the month or whatever. Or if you're just helicoptering somebody in, try to make it sustainable, so that as you bring in new people and new leaders, or people are growing in their roles, that everyone has consistent training. And this way it sticks. And I always say it's like you gotta make it last. And then as far as any books, so one really great book that I'm a huge fan of is The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. And I don't know if you guys have read it, but it is the author of the book. He actually went into different organizations to get an understanding of what makes them tick. So he went into like Disney, Pixar, and the Navy SEALs and IDO, and really great cultures, and wanted to understand what that was all about. But it's a really practical book. So it talks about building safety, like psychological safety. It talks about being vulnerable, and then it talks about telling your story. So like that, giving that direction. And I find that any of the leadership development training that I've ever seen, this is kind of saying a lot of those things, but it's a really digestible book that is great. And then actually just finished as a result of that one is it's called Creativity Inc. And it's written by Ed Catmull, who was the one of the founders of Pixar. And well, if you love any Disney or any Pixar movies, then there's some insights into that, but just some really good leadership advice. And it's very practical. And it was just a really fun read for me.
Nice. I always love a book recommendation, especially going into like the cozy fall season.
Yeah.
One last question before we kind of move into Ken's seminar, and that's that small businesses maybe can't always offer the wages and benefits or perks that larger organizations are able to. So what other creative ways can small businesses provide staff with benefits?
Yeah. Well, compensation and benefits are not cheap. It's a big expense line. There are some low-cost ways that you can try to combat that. And like I said before, if you're a smaller organization, you've got a lot of flexibility to maybe do some of those things or make those decisions. First of all, anything with food goes over well. And so maybe it's bringing in a food truck. It doesn't have to be all the time, but it's a bit of a nice perk. But I have to say, once we brought in the Bridge Drive-In food truck, And that that went over so well. People love ice cream apparently. But I mean, it comes down to knowing your audience as well and tapping into what they like and what kind of signals that you're sending them. So if it's a health conscious group and you're leaving them chocolates in lunchroom, maybe that's not going to go over so well. So there's things like that. But then time is also, we talked about, it seems to be a theme and it wasn't intentional, but time is a commodity. People value time, either time off or time with you and your time, or how they spend their time, and things like, a lot of organizations do community service days or volunteer days. And I've seen that just, the results of that are amazing because people come back, they're grateful for it. And the experiences that they share from that are just, they're long lasting. And it's also an opportunity if your team can go as a group, it's a bit of team building as well. And then if you think about development days, maybe it's not just about learning leadership or any kind of technical skill. It might be other types of development, non-work, maybe it's cooking or a pottery class or something like that to go, but it has to match with the workforce that you have. And then, team sponsored events. So marathon relay teams, super spike, people like experiences. So tickets to arts or cultural events or sporting events. And then there's the one thing that, a little can go a long way. And something that I like to keep in mind is give them something that reminds them that they use a lot. So depending on your workforce, if you pay for their Spotify account and they're using it every day, they're going to remember it, or like their Apple Music, or if you send them a subscription for coffee or tea or flowers or, for monthly, they're receiving that on a regular basis. If it's a family, if you've got a lot of people with families, Costco membership, think about every time they're using their Costco membership, they're going to remember that. Pets in the office is also something else that's really good. And then just one one that always was surprising to me was back when I was at Strata, we did it was just a flexible spending account. And the intent of it, because it was a lot of families. And so the intent of it was to bring balance into our lives and wellness. And so it covered expenses like equipment. So you could get a bike or golf clubs, or it pays for your gym membership. But then we added some fun things into it, like going to the spa, getting your house cleaned, things like that. And I'm telling you, because we were small and trying to pull people in and trying to hire them. And I remember somebody sitting across the table from me in an interview, and she said, "You mean to tell me you're going to cover my spa days?" And I was like, yes. And I think that might have just sold her. And the cost of it was so little, it just goes so much further. And it's much more lasting than if you just were to slap that cash onto their paycheck.
Oh, amazing. Those were so many great ideas in there. I think we have to remember that we could go back and watch this video later, and when we're in that spot, when we're hiring or we're looking at innovative ideas. Larissa, unless there's anything else to add? No? Great. Well, thank you, Dawn, for sharing all of your insights today and for everything that you do for our small business community. We appreciate the time that you've taken and spent with us, and all the resources and information that you've provided us in this short time together. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for listening to me. And this was fun.
Great. Bye. Next up, we have an engaging hands-on leadership workshop hosted by Ken Teramura. Ken is the founder and CEO of Be Positive Team-Based Consulting. Ken was born and raised in Winnipeg and graduated from the University of Manitoba with a Bachelor of Education. Following graduation, Ken worked for Investors Group and for 30.5 years and retired in August of 2011. During his time with IG, Ken worked in every division except investment. Most of his career was spent with the consultant network from Client Services, Advanced Financial Planning, E&C Division, and the IG Institute. During his tenure at IG, he also worked on various volunteer committees, most notably with Folklorama for the last 35 years. Following his retirement in 2011, Ken started his own consulting company, Be Positive, Ken has been married to his wife Kathy for 30 years and has a daughter Keely, son Connor, grandsons Ezra and Shay, and dogs Zeppelin and Sumo. Welcome, Ken.
Sorry about that, Christine, and everyone.
No worries.
Thank you very much. I could have listened to Dawn for another half an hour here, and my arm is sore from all her tips here. So thank you very much, Dawn. One of the things that I took away from Dawn's session, and I think it came very clear into her presentation, is that HR is very, very complex, and you never know from one day or another what kind of HR issue you're going to face. And so I would suggest, and Dawn made a reference to this, is to have a go-to person in terms of the HR side. So find someone like a Dawn, if you can, have the good fortune to do that. I always tell clients that it takes a pack, or it takes a village to run a business. And, most business owners will have an accountant, they'll have a lawyer, they need to have an HR person, hopefully a business coach, a shameless plug there, but they should be part of your leadership team. And having someone like that, you don't necessarily have to use them all the time, but let me tell you, when you need them and you don't have them, that's absolutely huge for your business. So thank you very much for that, Dawn. I think, Sean, can you just bring up the PowerPoint if you can, please? Awesome. So today is working on the business, and just like with Dawn's session, we could spend a lot more time than we are, but we're just going to get into one simple concept that I hope you take away from this. So next slide, please, Sean. Thank you very much for everyone's help here on the chamber, Sean as well, doing the backup, and also to Dawn. The other thing that I want to raise with Dawn's session is whether you're a business owner or you're part of a team, you should always be looking for potential staff or teammates. And it's not just on the shoulders of the business owner, it's on everybody. Because if you're part of a team and you lose a team member, you have just as much invested in all that. So your head should always be on a swivel looking for people. So, okay. So who is B positive? I know that's grammatically incorrect, but we'll go get away from that. So basically, once I took early retirement from Investors Group, I continued in terms of on the practice side, on the coaching side, and working with small teams. Now, small teams, I define teams of 10 people or less, right? So it has nothing to do with revenue, it has nothing to do with any of that kind of stuff. So working with them. And I found that a lot of business owners may be good sales people, but they're not good in terms of processes, or they're not good with working with teams. So there's a lot of opportunities there. Also focusing business owners to think big picture and longer term, right? And Dawn talked a lot about hiring to that bigger picture and long-term stuff. And strategic mean moving the business forward, right? So when I work with different businesses, I may not know how to create desktop functionality, but from a business perspective and moving things forward, what's going to work and what needs to work on. And most importantly, I think it's just fine tuning the business. There's no way that you can have the time to reconstruct your business. It's just fine tuning one piece at a time. And you may have a laundry list of things to work on, but realistically, you can only work on it one piece at a time. Okay. So next up, there we go. So, here's the question I'm going to ask you. Is your business stronger today than it was pre-COVID? And the reason why I asked that question is that the world has changed quite significantly. And as a business owner, has your world changed for the better? Or do you need to readjust based on the new world? And I think, when we talk about working on the business, what we're talking about is taking a step back from what we do day to day and take a look at where the business is right now. Is it on course from our long-term view? And do we need to make any tweaks or adjustments? And so, I know when COVID hit, regardless of the sector, everybody's business changed. And has it changed for the better? And what needs to be improved? There we go. So why don't business owners work on their business? So, hopefully some of these reasons may resonate with you. A lot of people say, I've never done it before. I have no idea where to start working on the business. They say to me, Ken, how am I going to work on a business when I'm maxed out already? How am I going to find the time? Other people say, you know what, it's too much work. When you hold the mirror up, you kind of go, oh my goodness, this is what I have to work on. And it seems like a lot of work, and the other one is the business is doing great, I think. And I think, it's interesting, and here's a fun fact, but most business owners spend more time planning family vacations than they do working on their business. And for those of you who that's contrary, I tip my hat to you, but most people, for whatever reason, don't, and especially the more successful you are, the less there is a preponderance to work on the business. And when we talk about working on the business, we'll get into it a little bit, but it's just fine tuning the business to make sure that where the business is now is aligned from where you started and where you want to go. Okay. So what does working on the business mean? Again, we kind of touched a little bit on this. So comparing your business now to your original vision. And, with COVID's told us that, the business world has changed. And so how has that affected your business? Some other hard questions. Am I operating as efficiently as I should or can be? And Dawn talked about the efficiencies in terms of the interview process, right? Especially if you're not good at that process, do you bring someone else on or do you kind of muddle through? So those are some of the decisions. Am I as profitable, or is a business as profitable as it should be? Is it sustainable over the long term? And I know, some of those businesses that are just starting up, you kind of go, well, I don't think that's an issue right now, but that should always be part of your vision. We talked about the team component with Dawn's session. Am I utilizing my team as efficiently as I should or can be? Do I have the right team? And do I have the right people at the right spots at the right time? And for those business owners, what is my exit strategy? It was interesting listening to Dawn and that whole bringing staff on and all those kind of things. One of the things when I used to talk to business owners about the exit strategy, they automatically thought about leaving the business. And I said, what happens if your 2 or 3 key people on your team leave? What are you going to do? What's your plan B? And a lot of business owners don't have a plan B for that. And so, back to Dawn's point is you should always have a stable of people that can step in. Again, going back to the challenging the team, who can we bring in? Who are some potential candidates that we can talk to? Because Murphy's Law will tell you, if you don't have a plan to replace someone, they will leave. And as a business owner, and especially as a small business owner, now you're really stuck. Because if you can't find a replacement for that person, you have to take on that role on top of everything else that you're doing. So when we did this session, I asked Rael to ask the Small Business Advisory Council, what are the things that keep you up at night? And so here are the top 3 they came up with: finding the right people, where should business owners be looking to hire, and incorporating inclusion and diversity. And if you're listening to Dawn's session, she addressed all three of these points. So I hope those people who from the Small Business Advisory Council were taking notes. I would like to take the time to kind of address the fact that the Chamber does have a Small Business Advisory Council. I was a member of the Chamber a number of years ago, and I know if I had access to people like Larissa and Christine, that would have been well worth the registration fee for joining the Chamber. So take advantage of these people. They feel your pain. They have their own businesses, know exactly what what you're going through. So by all means, take advantage of those people. Next slide, please, Sean. There. So in terms of top 3 challenges, well, for me, increasing revenues in slower months, right? Trying to smoothen out that up and down curve, driving more referral activity. So, it's a lot easier to get clients when your clients are referring them, and increasing the proper prospect outreach activity, right? So if you're doing the right thing. So these are some of the things that would force or would force me anyway to work on the business. And so what we're going to do is we're going to give you an opportunity to kind of delve into these things, and also you get to pick your own. But these are the kind of topics that I'm talking about when I'm asking you to think about working on the business. And in the day-to-day routine, or I shouldn't say routine because it's not really routine, but in the day-to-day challenge of running a business, you really don't have time to stop and take a look at these particular issues, develop a strategy, and then either implement them, introduce them to the team, or whatever the case may be. And it's important because sometimes if we don't anticipate some of these challenges, we get caught. And as a business owner, your head's on the swivel all the time. You're looking for, like I said, the day-to-day stuff and staffing and inventory and all that kind of stuff. But some of these bigger pictures can be something that could really put a dent into your business. And you need to find a way to think about it, to anticipate, and to grow your business. Okay. Next slide, please, John. So what's the impact to your business? So how have these challenges, and I'm talking about the individual challenges that you may have running your business. So if you think about the 3 things that keep you up at night about your business, how have these challenges impacted your business? Are they new? Are they pre-COVID? And how have you tried to address these challenges? And again, some of them are not easy. We listened to Dawn's session. You pick any of those HR issues. They're not anything that you can fix on the fly or implement the night before. You need to spend some dedicated time thinking about how am I going to work on this stuff. And it's important that you have a process. It's important that you take some time to think these things through, to validate them, and to come up with strategies. Next slide, please, Sean. So when you're addressing the challenges, there's a number of things to think about. Your solutions have to align with both the vision of your business and your long-term view. When I work with business owners and I ask them about their vision, and especially if they've been around for a while, they have forgotten what their vision is. Like, why did you start your business? And it's a great way to to understand some of the challenges they may have. And just as importantly, what will your business look like 5 years from now? And so people ask me, well, why do you need to know that, Ken? And so if I'm working with a business owner on a particular challenge, I need to anchor my recommendations to the long-term vision. Because if it's not anchored to the long-term vision, then it's just a temporary fix. It's just a Band-Aid fix. But if it's anchored to the long-term vision of the business, now I know that it has sustainability, providing that the vision of the business remains the same. And the sustainability is important, especially when you have people on the team, and to say to them, this is why we're changing. This is how it affects the long-term view. And as Dawn pointed out, people need to understand how these changes affect them. And so you need to kind of take these into consideration when you're addressing your challenges. So I'm a very graphic person. So, here you have the top challenge. You have working solutions. They need to work side by side. The original vision works coincidentally with the long-term view. Your challenge needs to line up with the original vision, up and down, And so the same in terms of working solutions and the long-term view. So if you're trying to figure out how these things come together, here's a graphic way of doing these things. Okay. Next slide, please, Sean. So what we're going to do is I've given you a very brief overview very quickly. We're going to break you up into small groups. And we're going to ask each group to pick a person as a leader because you're going to be reporting back to the main group. Pick one topic out of the many, whether it's from Dawn's session or from some of these things that I've come up with or your own. As a group, come up with some possible solutions and then report back to the main group. And when you're reporting back to the main group, you'll have a 2-minute debrief opportunity to explain it to the rest of the group. How useful was that exercise? Just comments?
It was a really nice exercise to be able to have discussions. I was lucky enough to be in a room with Anel, who is a recruiter, as she was saying. So she was able to really discuss and talk about, we got into the discussion of hiring and the hiring process and that sort of thing. Awesome. And she was really able to give some good insights, especially discussing frontline workers right now, stores and that sort of thing, where COVID times have changed and people have took that time to go and get more educated and go to college and take these programs. So they're really struggling for that. And then the culture of just the entire world has changed a little, where somebody that works at, the Walmart down the street from me doesn't want to go back to work because they don't want to get yelled at and screamed at by somebody because they don't want to wear a mask. Like they're not getting paid enough to be in that environment. Yeah.
All right. Anyone else? Other questions? We were gonna do this at the end of the session, but now that we're into it, anyone else have any other questions or comments in terms of what they discussed?
Sure, from our group. So I want to thank Robert, and I think we had Gregory and we had Cindy in our group. So we're talking about what to do during the slower months. There's a lot of opportunities that can come by our way, and so there's a lot of shining stars. And it's just to navigate that and to see, what makes sense. For us at Herzing, we're always looking at, new diploma programs, new be it certification. And so, there might be industry saying, oh, there's this going on, but we need to do that research, right? Need to make sure that there'll be people wanting to take those courses and creating and that. So we do have a brand new course that will be launched starting for January, cybersecurity. So we're very excited. So it'll be our 13th diploma program. Do reach out if anybody wants to hear more. And we're always looking for collaboration. We want to just make a stronger Winnipeg, stronger Manitoba. But in speaking with Robert as well, he was looking at August was a bit slower. So they looked at consulting to do that, to offer that service, which was really great. But we talked about research, needing that research component. And so I will give a shout out to my past employer, WTC Winnipeg. Their research is phenomenal. Kudos to all my past colleagues, and do reach out to WTC for that research component. It can be really beneficial to finding out, because as he mentioned, like pricing and different things like that. And, there's access to research that's free. So I would, really encourage you. So if you're looking for any business information, I'd recommend that. If you're looking for education information, please reach out to myself. So it was been a great session today. Thank you to yourself, Ken and Dawn.
Great, good to hear. It's interesting comments, Nicole, because oftentimes as business owners, we'll sit down and we'll plan the next year, and we'll say, these are the things that we want to hit upon. And then something like COVID hits, and now it kind of knocks us off our game, right? So, working on the business means, do we go back to what we did before? Are the business goals we set for the coming year, are they important? If we're on track, how do we get back on track, right? One of the things that I was talking to Amelia was about taking a step back to work on what does the next 30 days or next 90 days, next quarter look like, right? So if it is slower, do we spend time doing research? Do we spend time implementing a new course like you talked about, right? And oftentimes when you're in the day-to-day and the days blur into months, and next thing you know, the year's done, right? And so if you don't take that step back and work on the business, I mean, it's like putting your business, taking a time out for your business and just making sure that you're on track. So thank you very much for those comments. Any other groups want to weigh in terms of their discussion? I know some people didn't have time, just got time to introduce themselves and get into the issues, but anyone else want to share anyone else want to?
Well, Ken, our group, we were chatting, and I know we didn't have enough time, but kind of to piggyback off what Nicole was talking, it's like, what you know, right? And when you're in an organization and you don't have the right support, you may not have the right processes, you may not have gone through leadership training, you might not even gone through management training, and then all of a sudden you're in this new role, and where do you start? Where do you get the resources? Our group, is participating in this, and some of those challenges arise, and this is a great place to start. Nicole brought up WTC. Depending on those different associations or organizations that could support professional development on a specific area, it's understanding and knowing what you know, and if you're in these situations when you're dealing with HR, you're dealing with culture, and you're trying to kind of help. You then get appointed to that, knowing where to start and where to go. And I know that in today's session, Dawn gave lots of great resources that I think people can start with.
Yeah. Well, and I think I'd like to throw it back to you, Christine and Larissa, and the Small Business Advisory Council, right? So the Chamber's got a lot of resources. Mm-hmm. And, I used to be a member of the Chamber before, and I used to tell people, you guys don't know how good you are. You really don't know, because there's so much stuff. I know a lot of people focus on the networking and the social aspect, but from a business owner's perspective, there's so many resources. And I think the Chamber needs to sell itself more on some of the gaps to their business and how do you address them. Now, with your comment towards, a different role, I think you can only implement so much in a short period of time. And so you have to, it's like your to-do list at home. You've got 10 things on there. Start at the top and do it well. Because what happens is many of us will see the 10 things, and what we'll do? We try to address all 10 at the same time. And guess what happens? You get frustrated because you set expectations with your team, you haven't fulfilled them, you look poor as a leader. So just pick one and say, which one skill do I need to work on? And then based on that, you can source the best spot to kind of address it and go from there, right? So, there are so many things that run through a business owner's head at any given time. And I find that when things get really out of control, I have to slow things down. And I tell my clients, what that means is you focus on less. Less is more. And if you focus that on, then you can get back into your groove and then you're fine again, right? But especially when things just, when things get out of control, professionally, personally, all these other things, right? Dealing with COVID, all the issues, right? It can become very intimidating, right? And so you just have to say, okay, so wait a minute, what am I trying to do here, right? I'm trying to bring in revenue. Okay, so do all the other 5 things that I'm chasing my tail with, is that generating revenue for me? Or can it wait till tomorrow? Can it wait till next month? And go from there. And the most important thing is to allow yourself to forgive yourself for doing that, right? Because as business owners, we kind of go, well, I have to do it all today, right? And then deal with tomorrow's wishes. Well, that's not physically possible, or you'll burn yourself out very quickly, right? So what's the most important thing, right? And, for those of you who are into books, Larissa, if you haven't read the book, Start With Why from Simon Sinek, right? Great place to start. Simon's great on Twitter in terms of motivational things, but that's where you have to come back to is your core. What's the original vision for being, and you go from there. All right. Could someone else chime in here? We still have some bit of time here. So.
Yeah, our group started just kind of dipping our toes into talking about marketing, and Exactly what you're talking about, Ken, is like, yeah, everybody needs marketing. Everybody needs to decide to, put some roots in and try to look for generating business, especially if you have capacity to do more business, then I think you think that you have to start marketing. And I think there are ways that we think marketing should look based on how we are presented with ads, and like our social media feeds are full of businesses posts on a daily basis. And exactly what you're saying with, having 10 plus items at the top of your to-do list, it's really scaling it back, especially to scale for the size of your business and for the amount of capacity you have as like an owner operator or whoever is managing your marketing initiatives. Scaling it to a size that works for you, and honing in on what that is that you're going to like give some solid effort to before moving on and trying something else. Because unfortunately, it's not magic. Marketing is not magic.
It isn't? Really?
And it doesn't, like, you can't just throw one Facebook ad up there and like all of a sudden, we're back to, August 2019 level of business.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the worst case scenario, Larissa, is all the prospects you're chasing become clients all at the same time, right? And then what do you do, right? And so now there's that expectation to deliver and you don't have the capacity, right? And it's interesting, like for social media, so a lot of the clients that I'm working with are now going to social media. And, I'm not a social media expert. I mean, I'm on Twitter and all that kind of stuff, but, I always say, how does this fit into what you're trying to do as a business? And how are you focusing your social media, to the target audience that you want to target to, right? And so from a communication perspective, that's obviously, you even at the best of time when you're connected, you don't know if it's going to reach the people you want it to reach to. So sorry about that. Right. So it's got to be, you have to have a focused strategy, and people just say, well, you just can't throw content on there. Says, no, the content has to be related to what your target audience and where you're trying to go, right? And it's unfortunate that the magic doesn't happen, but well, it's you just have to work through it, and experience will tell you that, right? So, anyway. All right. Any other groups here? Thank you very much, by the way. We've become shy all of a sudden. I'm not sure what's happening. Okay. Sean, maybe if you go back to the PowerPoint, we can just clean that up and then we'll go from there, if that's possible. Perfect. So I posed this slide before in terms of working on the business. And again, a lot of people, when I raise this issue, become very intimidated by it. Sorry, this sun's coming in here. Right. So again, what are the reasons why I've never done it before? I don't know where to start. Hopefully today you'll have an idea in terms of how to start. I have no time. Like I said, people spend more time planning their vacation than they do working on the business. So you need to make it a priority. It's too hard. I don't know, I'm afraid of what to do. You owe it to your business to work on it. And any entrepreneur will tell you that being an entrepreneur means you're out on those skinny branches more than you may want to be. And so working on the business initially is difficult. It's like any other muscle, you need to work on it. And once you keep working on it, the better you become, and it becomes less intimidating. It seems like a lot of work. Again, with the comments from Larissa's group, you take one thing and you work on it, and you get really good at it, right? And then on to the next challenge. And the last point in terms of business is doing well, again, that's sometimes successful businesses don't take a step back. And because they're going, well, why do I need to change my business, right? And especially because businesses now are so fast paced, if you're not looking out on the horizon in terms of what's out there, what can be a threat, if you've ever done a SWOT assessment of your business, what's happening in your industry, what's happening in the world, you may be doing well today, but tomorrow may not be as kind to you. So, and then the next question, now that you've gone through a simple process or a modified simulation, is it really that difficult? Is it really that difficult? Okay, Sean? So just some process things here, just so people don't, we like processes. The question is, now what, Ken, right? So how do I create, implement, monitor plans? Well, you need to set aside time to focus on one area. I pick the first Wednesday of every month, Wednesday morning. Before COVID, I work from my home office, but pre-COVID, I used to go down the street to Mountain Bean, a coffee shop, and I would, and that was an untouchable time. That was an untouchable time. I couldn't substitute that for taking the dogs for a walk or taking my daughter to a doctor's appointment. That was my time, and I stuck to that. You need to create an action plan and then milestone activities. So the strategy has to be broken down to, what do I need to accomplish? What are the key dates? And if I hit these key dates and I hit these key things, what does that look like? Typically, once I worked on a strategy, I'll come back home here and I'll plug in my action items into my calendar so that I know that, if I look at my calendar upcoming weeks, I know what has to be done. I know the deadline, and that keeps me accountable. And that's the big thing about this. Okay. Review the progress of your action items monthly, quarterly, and just see where you are and monitor. And then the last one, you taking a tip out of the marketing, the shampoo marketing people, rinse and repeat, right? It's not a one and done thing working on the business. It's a process. And it's almost, people tend to treat working on the business similar to a New Year's resolution. And for those of us who set New Year's resolution, by the 15th of January, we're done. We've failed a resolution and we beat ourselves up about it. Working on the business is not a win or lose situation. It's not an event. It's a process and it's a mindset. It's a process and it's a mindset. And what you need to do is you constantly work on it. So if it's, you start off quarterly and you work on it, and then next quarter you work on the business again. And then once you get some traction, maybe then you can do monthly. But it's just because it doesn't work the first time doesn't mean that you give up on it, because this is your business and there's nothing more important professionally than working on your business. Sean? Some best practices, pick a different location other than your office. And people have questioned me on this. I don't know the science behind this, but if you try and do this exercise in your office, it just doesn't work. And there's something to having different stimulus that stimulates different parts of the brain. And again, I'm not into, I don't know how the synaptic connections happen, but pick a different location. So whether it's, I just send clients to the library, coffee shop, Starbucks, whatever. Find a place where it's quiet and go from there. Pick your regular time, find something that works for you. I'm a morning person, so I pick the mornings. Other people are nighttime. Pick something that works for me, because what works for me may not work for someone else. Limit the time to your session to 60 minutes. I find that if you spend more time, personally speaking, you get distracted and you get very granular and you lose focus. So most people go, well, you know what, Ken, I can't afford to spend 3 hours working on my business. Well, I'm not asking you. I'm just asking you to spend 30 minutes or 60 minutes or whatever the case may be. We already talked about picking one topic. Keep working on the business file, Excel spreadsheet, notes file, whatever you guys use, right? And just throw it in there. And so when it comes to the day before you're going to sit down and work on a business, pick the number one thing that you need to pick on. Okay. First time is always the hardest. It gets easier with practice and discipline. You know what? And if you're finding your heart, it's difficult to do it by yourself, pick an accountability buddy and help them work it through, and then you can help them work through their issues. And the last question is, does your business deserve 60 minutes? And I think that that answer is self-explanatory. Sean? So why bother? Like I said, you know, if you can't get into shape without working out, is building your business any different, right? Maintaining status quo is not good enough. Not good enough for anyone's business, especially not good enough for your business. Okay. And I think you owe it to yourself, to your business, to yourself, if you're a leader, and to your clients, right? And it helps you stay sharp by focusing and constantly improving. And so, you know, Larissa talked about reading books. Well, if you're a student of the game, you'll constantly improve. And this is just another tool in your toolkit. Sean? So a little selfless plug here in terms of what I do. I always offer a complimentary session just to see if there's fit. My question will be the same as we talked about today. What are the 3 things that keep you up at night? And I want to know what your long-term vision is. And the reason why I ask those questions, just so I can see if there's a fit. Because if I can't help you, then I'm just wasting your time. There is no cookie cutter approach. Based on what your top 3 challenges are, then we'll figure out a strategy moving forward. But basically what I'll do is I'll have an initial session. 6 months later, I'll have another session. And in between, I'll have what I call accountability calls. So whether that's in person or on Zoom or on the phone, and go from there. Right. So if there's parts, if you feel that you can work on your business by yourself, great. Just like Dawn pointed out to us, if you need help on the HR stuff, put up your hand, find someone that can help you. Okay. Next slide, please, Sean. So here's something I found in the Twitterverse. Do something today that your future self will thank you for. So why bother? You know, there's so many different moving parts in terms of running a business, and it's mentally grinding to do that. And again, you throw in COVID on top of that and everything else. You know, you owe it to yourself to take a time out to say, where's my business now? And how will the 60 minutes I take on working on the business help my business down the road, right? So what I would say to you based on today's session, take one part of Dawn's session that you really feel you want to work on and try and implement that in the next 5 days. Take one point that you may have gotten from this session and implement it right away. The key is to implement it right away, to start working on it. You may not have everything complete, but start working on it and keep yourself accountable. And the same holds true for all the other speakers that the Chamber brings to you. They all have great messages. Just pick one thing that you can incorporate into your business, and your business will improve from there. Okay. I guess I'll introduce it or throw it back to the group. If there's any other questions, last minute questions here. Going once, going twice. Thank you very much, everyone. I really enjoyed this session. Dawn, thank you very much for your session. That was really informative. And like I said, the Chamber, you know what? They put on so many great sessions like this. Take the time out of your busy schedule to work on your business and grow your business. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks so much for sharing today. And I think that it's your business is appropriately named Be Positive. I think that just the attitude that you bring to the table is positive. And I think that sometimes we as business owners can get, a little bit grumpy about the way that things are going and the things that are out of our control. And I think the sentiment that you left us with was, yes, to be positive, but also, take one thing away and put one thing in your calendar and do something for yourself. And I appreciate that. And I hope that the rest of the group also takes that away and feels a little bit lighter going into the rest of the afternoon. So
great. Thank you very much, Larissa. Appreciate that.
Thank you. And then of course, Dawn, thank you again to you for providing so much insight at the top of the presentation today. And again, of course, to our event sponsors, and those being BDC and KPMG, the Chambers of Commerce Group Insurance Plan, and RBC. So really, on behalf of myself and Christine and the Small Business Advisory Council, thank you to everybody for being with us today. The Winnipeg Chamber is about us coming together and connecting and learning from one another. And I think there was a lot of learning to go around today. Our next small business event will be during Small Business Week, and that will be Mayor Brian Bowman's last Small Business Summit. So you can register for the free in-person summit on October 19th at the Fort Garry Hotel. And tickets are available at the Winnipeg Chamber website, so winnipegchamber.com. That same week, on the Friday, October 22nd, we are hosting our very first in-person membership luncheon since February 2020. And I know we talked a little bit about social media today, but who's on TikTok? TikTok is the biggest social media channel today with nearly 700 million active monthly users. And with this session, Liz Bertarelli, the social media lead from TikTok, she's the human behind the TikTok social media brand. So her talk is called The Human Behind the Brand. She's going to be sharing with you as small business owners how you can use that platform and other social media platforms to drive traffic and engage your potential customers simply by being yourself on social media. So really, for me as a marketer, this sounds like something that I'm not going to miss. And it sounds like something that we should all kind of stay tuned into if we're into upping our knowledge on the latest trends. So registration for that is happening at winnipegchamber.com as well. And that is all that Christine and I have for you today. So I think we would extend a thank you to Jess and Sean and Riel for organizing today's event. And really, thank you everybody for being here.
Thanks everyone. Bye.